Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Brett's Brain. Today, we're going to continue our series focused on strategies for founders going through a black swan event or an economic downturn. And specifically, we're going to focus on managing headcount and salaries. One of the most common pieces of advice for founders right now is you're going to have to lay people off or you're going to have to reduce salary. And the reason is because usually for entrepreneurship, for a startup, the biggest expense item you have is salaries. So 3 tips for you. The first is if you're going to reduce salaries, make sure that the founders and your own salary is included in that reduction. It does not set a great example if you reduce everybody else's salaries, but you keep yours the same. And you need to make it known that you're reducing yours as well. Although I know some people don't like talking about their own salaries, you got to let people know that you're reducing your own salary. In fact, what some founders do, and this can really help morale, is the founders will reduce their own salary first, ahead of anybody else, ahead of the time. Even if they don't think they're going to have to reduce salaries across the board ever, they might reduce theirs early on in the process just to set that precedent. So if in a month or 2 months things aren't going as well as they expected, they can reduce everybody else's, and your employees will remember what you did. The second is you might not need to do a blanket 20% reduction across the board. If you're a small organization with just a couple of employees, and maybe it's just co-founders, sometimes what can actually really help build culture is have a group conversation and basically say, what can people afford? What kind of reduction can people afford to take? What do you need to survive so we can get through it? You do have to be careful with that because of some laws and regulations. But if you have a small team of just founders, sometimes that can be a really powerful way to bring people together, and maybe one person can afford to only take a 5% reduction and another person can afford a 50%. So doing a blanket 20% might not work for that scenario, and you might lose some great employees if you take that path. All right, and our third piece of advice is on letting people go. Reductions are really hard. I've laid people off, I've fired people. It's always hard to do. The reality in some of these scenarios are you're gonna have to let some people go. If for some entrepreneurs, and it's better to lay some people off than for the business to go out of business and everybody lose their jobs. If that's the decision you're having to make, it's not necessarily the immoral thing to do to have to let somebody go. If that's what it takes to keep a business alive, it's better to maintain the jobs you can. And you need to provide as soft a landing as you possibly can for those employees that are going to be affected by the layoff. Help them get their next role. Do everything you can to put them in the right place. Give them, a little bit of severance if you possibly can. If you can keep them on your health insurance for a while, do that. There are certain ways you can make it a bit softer for those employees, but at the end of the day, you need to keep your business alive. And the last piece of advice on letting people go is it's better to cut deep early than have to do layoffs regularly. If you're laying one person off every week or every month, it's going to crush your morale. It's going to be a morale hit when you do your first layoff anyways, but it's better to do them all at the same time and to survive throughout the entire crisis until the economy starts turning around, your startup starts turning it up. It's much easier to recover culturally from one big cut than it is from smaller, regular cuts over time. Hopefully that helps.